Bum ba da da dee da da dee da 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 dum. Bum ba dee da da ba da da ba dum. Bum ba da dee da da dee da da dum. Bum ba da dee da ba da dum. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to this edition of the Tuesday telecast from the Joyful Path. I am your host, Lydia Laurie Bustler, and I am super excited to talk about confidence today uh, through not telling ourselves a bunch of stuff that isn't true. And I have a friend, a recent friend actually, but deeply admire this woman. She is none other than Jennifer Fiedler. She is an expat from Hollywood, and we're going to talk to her about what I'll let her tell you. So let's go look and see. And yep, she's here. Let's bring Jennifer into the house. Hello, Jennifer.
Hey, Lydia, how are you?
I am so good. How are you?
Awesome. I'm so stoked to be here, man. Very
Yeah.
exciting. Thank you.
Well, I'm excited to have you here too. I There's anything that I love and I think my audience loves, it's a creative, and it's also a creative who can think outside of their little box of their mind. So let's go. Um, I was just saying to my audience that you are a expat from Hollywood. At least that's what I will call it. And your jam now is just to help other people get past their ideas of nonsense. We have a lot of stories in our head, and I it looks like we actually, I've heard that this wasn't going so well on LinkedIn, but I see that we have at least somebody able to see us on LinkedIn. So hello, Carrie. And Carrie has been on the show before too. So um yeah, and here's another. So apparently we are live indeed. All right. Hello, Crystal Phoenix. And all right. So tell me about what it is that kind of kicked you out of Hollywood and into what you're doing now? Or have you kind of always been doing what you're doing now, even back when you were doing the Hollywood thing?
Yeah. Well, first off, I refer to myself as a refugee as opposed to an expat because Hollywood's brutal, man. And those of us that work there, it's so counter the cultural perception of like, oh, the land of milk and honey and glamour and fun and filmmaking is brutal. It's long hours and dirty work. So if you're down with an 80-hour work week and pumping equipment and the egos and the toxicity and all the rest of it, like, welcome to the show. So I had, yeah, I went to Hollywood. I grew up in Chicago, and got bitten by the filmmaking bug and moved out there and did that for quite a while. And it got to a place where I was in this, well, to address your question, what got me out of there was what I refer to as a cosmic bitch slap, which is my website and my coaching practice. And a cosmic bitch slap is how the universe, exactly, how the universe shows us something we're ignoring or we're unable to see or we're unwilling to see, which is to say, living in our story. I'm this, I'm that, blah, blah. And often our story's bullshit and it leads us to places that don't allow us to fulfill our potential or to be who we really are. We spend our lives living as someone other than ourself, our true authentic self. And that's when you get a cosmic bitch slap. And some people, that's something like overworked and overstressed and they have a heart attack and it stops them dead in their tracks.
Sure.
For others of us, it's just I burned out. I mean, I as I say, Hollywood is very toxic and brutal and very competitive, but it's also super addictive, right? It's like exhilaration and excitement, and every job, every show is in a new place and new people, and like, blah, it's super exciting. And that excitement is highly addictive. And I don't mean like gambling or blow or booze or whatever. It's a serious life altering addiction. So, yeah, I just burned out, and I realized one day I had been pushing all this toxicity away, and my arms got tired, and I knew I was done, and I ran as far away as I could, saying I'd never do this again. And my life, I spent the next 10 years living overseas, doing something completely different. But the thing about authenticity that's so important in life and about confidence is we have, oh, yeah, just the word Hollywood is electrifying and exciting. Yeah, indeed, indeed. And unless you're living that and in that, I can relate to what you're saying, absolutely. And that's what draws so many people there endlessly. At
Right.
any rate, I to live your life being authentic involves the understanding that we all possess a unique brilliance, and that's not to say we're unique from other people. I believe in the oneness of consciousness, and we're all part of a whole. And yet, at the same time, each of us possesses a unique brilliance. There's something about us that we're better at than anyone else, or there's something about us that's unique. And
Yeah.
when we don't live authentically, when we live in stories, we don't honor that, we never discover that, and we're kind of miserable. And part of that misery is manifested by a lack in confidence, and most importantly, a lack in worthiness. So I read this appalling statistic that 80% of women on a global scale believe they're unworthy. And even more horrifying, of that 80%, 92% believe they lack the confidence it takes to succeed. And I heard that statistic and I like threw up because that's like so wrong and so bad. And so,
Right.
and this really motivated me to go from just kind of, I don't like jargon, like life coaching, to talking about specifically worthiness and confidence. And oh, hey, Brad Walsh, bad Brad Walsh, how you doing, man? Um, basically, I just totally lost my train of thought.
I know.
This
Audience
worthiness
participation.
thing. Yeah, right. So awakening to our worthiness, and my jam is doing that, awakening women to their worthiness and igniting their confidence. And
Yeah.
so what we do in Hollywood when we're successful in order to work in Hollywood. So, right, everybody's self employed. We don't have day jobs, we don't work for companies. We're self employed. I mean, of course, there's people that work for Warner Brothers and Universal and Sony, blah, blah, blah. But crew people on movies and TV shows are all self employed. And I've identified some key factors that have to do with worthiness and confidence, because in Hollywood we have this mindset of worthiness and an attitude that radiates confidence, because if you don't work. So some very key contributing factors to that, which are things that took me a while to figure out because I've always been possessed of this. And so what we ourselves have, we kind of take for granted, right? Um, but one of them, one of the huge ones is so often, I'm sure this has happened to many of you, of something new happens and you're like, oh, holy shit, you go into like stress shock mode. How am I going to deal with this, particularly when it's in the workplace? And
Mm.
we immediately kind of slam into this space of, oh my God, and the thing of that is, in Hollywood, every movie we work on is on a different location. It's with a different crew. It's a different script. It's a different
Yeah.
cast. So we are inured to dealing with differences. And it comes down to a super simple premise, which is our survival supercomputer, our brain. Uh, we're kind of programmed to see differences. And that's a survival mechanism because that would keep us alive. Like there we are walking to the river to get our water for the day. And peripherally, we notice a flattened area of the brush that looks different. It wasn't like that yesterday. That's because the saber-toothed tiger slept there last night.
Right.
So your brain is programmed to look at things and perceive them as being unfamiliar or dissimilar or just different. And by being aware of that, we can override the survival supercomputer, right? And we can train ourselves to see similarity, to be like, oh, this is like that. Oh, this is and once you can do that, once you can say, oh, this is just like that, all that stress evaporates.
Yeah,
And
don't you think that we also have that inherent in us? I mean, with all this, we're all born with all these stories. Yeah, we have these stories that tell us who we are. We were talking about that before you were, and yet they get hit. We get hit with them right away, right?
yeah,
But then we have this inherent fear of what's different, and we notice it. And what's different is what is not in our story of how we are and how we should be. But don't we, if we really sink down into our gut, have something also that shows us, for the same reason, for survival, shows us those similarities as well, or how we what we can assimilate or what we should
absolutely.
assimilate.
Absolutely, and it's conceivably it's an issue of discernment, right? To be able to discern, oh, that person's just like I am, or oh wow, this is like way out of my zone, man. This is so different that I mean, there's no denying if we were magically planted on Mars, it would be super different and for real. That's not a perceived difference. That's an actual. That's different. But I think that to speak to what you raised, our story comes from our environment. It comes from our families and our educators and our clergy and people who, when we're children, are put there to instruct us. And
Mhm.
the thing about this is that all of these people, in a perfect world, of course, have our best interest in mind. And so when they spin these stories, you're 5, 6, 7 years old, and that they're trying to help us and protect us, right? So an example of this would be the global peasant mentality that my family's better than his family. Oh yeah, our family, okay, you're all eating pulse. Nobody's wearing shoes. Everyone's struggling for survival, and yet that's part of our ego and human nature is to somehow differentiate ourselves or elevate ourselves or whatever. And therein lies the rub because differentiation conscious differentiation serves our ego. Conscious non differentiation serves everyone. And so, back in this example, what actual purpose does it serve for your grandma to tell you your husband's family is a bunch of jerks, what purpose does that serve? As opposed to saying something like, you know, your husband's family is wonderful people and they've done this and they came from the, it creates unity and coherence. So this is all human programming, right? But I do take your point and agree that part of the survival thing, it's discernment, what's similar, what's dissimilar, but it really requires awareness and the ability to examine what we look at and instantly decide it's different.
Mm,
And in my experience, people who never travel far away from their home, people who never leave their families. I have a client who has lived very close to her family all her life. Her mom was her best friend. She's very involved in her siblings and their lives and their worlds and what. And she's never been out of the country, and she's never traveled much more than, I don't know, 50 miles away from where she grew up.
mm,
And to some extent, this attitude of, oh, this is just like that, needs to be cultivated, and a route to cultivating that is expanding our reality. And we're fortunate. I mean, I had that happen to me living on 4 continents over the course of 10 years, to see that I'm a big fan of, you know, cultures and diversity, cultural diversity and food and stuff and
yeah,
whatever.
who wouldn't be?
But like, yeah, and but notwithstanding the cultural diversity, the underlying base note is similarity. And
Hmm.
I think that it's really important for us to get in that space of mental expansion, to just allow that to come in. It, you know, like, of course, not everybody works in Hollywood with a job that every day is different and whatever, but we do all work and live amongst people and in places where we encounter scenarios that they're very different to us. They stress us out, they frighten us, they whatever, and it ends there. And what I invite is to not end it there, but to sit with that and be like, okay, well, wait a minute. This
Right.
would be just like that. And then that's a huge and instantaneous release of stress, anxiety, and fear. And with practice, that helps us acquire this mindset of worthiness, because what contributes to our feelings of unworthiness, of course, are when we're stressed and anxious and fearful, and I can't, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much not belonging when we belong anyway. We were born belonging, and but we lose track of that as we have this, as you said, ego that is trying to differentiate ourselves and make ourselves vital and unique and survivable. And but when you talk about the belonging, there's there's also, what do you think about I believe that conflict is a thing of actually similarities that are not being seen when and what's happening usually in the case of any sort of conflict is that there's that fear that you were talking about. It might not seem like fear in ourselves, but we're actually fearful of losing our status, or fearful of
Yeah.
losing our job, or fearful for our life, or our longevity, or for our partners, or for but there's a fear in that. And when we recognize that, oh, they're not just being a jerk, they're actually trying to maintain what is dear to them, and so am I. Like, boom, because that's what makes us human. That is
Absolutely,
such a human
absolutely.
thing.
And there's some weird, I can't remember the psychological term for this, but the basic premise is, it's okay if I do it, but it's not okay if you do it. And
Mm,
and this is an actual psychological syndrome type of thing. And so that's kind of what you're speaking to. Like, it's okay if I do that, but you're doing the same thing. Yeah, no, that's so not okay, right?
Right.
And another huge part of this is this perpetual need to compare ourselves to other people. And this also comes from a place of fear and a place of whatever. We don't need to go there. But I mean, we kind of, instead of looking inside of ourselves to see who we really are, who is your authentic self, who the hell am I, man, what do I like, what turns me on, what do I hate,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, the new normal is to numb ourselves, right? So we binge on Netflix, we read, we game, we do we follow like celebrity websites, and we read self-help books, and the net result of all of these things show us people who have lives that we want and believe we can never have, and it all collectively contributes to our feeling of unworthiness. But the
Mm.
bottom line is we actively seek shit that makes us feel bad because we're comparing ourselves to that. And so this is a huge part of my practice of when you compare, and we all, this again, this is human nature, right? Invariably, we hold ourselves up next to someone, measure ourselves against them, and come
Mhm.
up short.
And
And
how can we help but do that? That's what our parents have shown us you're supposed to do. That's what our
when
colleagues have
we
shown us that's what you're supposed to do.
when we live in our well, come on, man, you've got a choice, and awareness is the seed of choice. So just because that's what we were taught to do doesn't mean we need to swallow that. So it's a matter of awareness that this is what you're on autopilot. You're in an invisible feedback loop living on autopilot. You have a choice. You can choose to look at that and say, "Yeah, no, man, I'm not doing that." Or
Mm.
I mean, whether you get that you have a choice or not, you have a choice. So,
I think that's partially your taught. Whoops, wrong thing here. There's a question here, and I
uh,
think this is
you
very.
believe individuals stuck in their own bubbles are more prone to judging others? Absolutely. Because when we're in our own bubble, we're in this tribal peasant mentality of, oh, well, my family is better than his family. So, yes, absolutely. And conceivably, when you ask about a bubble, that's like this closed environment where that's all you encounter, and you've never seen anything different. You've never experienced anything different. You've been deeply and completely inculcated in your caregivers, your family, your teachers, your clergy, without ever having the opportunity to see what exists outside of that.
Yeah, what we believe is truth.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
there's like a little delay here. I'm sorry if I interrupted. Sometimes the airwaves get a little
It's all
wonky.
good. It's all
Uh,
good.
so if we're talking on top of one another, thanks for sticking with us, folks. But there's what we believe is truth, like 100%. So if we believe what's on the television, it doesn't matter if it's our truth. And the fact is there's going to be some similarity in there, right? Because we are so similar, but it may not be our truth at all. It may be is some fear-based thing that is sensational, and sell ads and people watch it, and yet it becomes our truth. And it's hard to know what our authentic self is when we sit in that and we decompress from our job that we think we need to have because it's the family job, or we're the first ones with education, or we are X, Y, or Z that we have told ourselves and been told that we are. And we go and decompress because we're so stressed out from our work. And we're shown all this stuff that becomes our truth. So how does one get out of this?
It involves introspection. There is no short answer. You must look inside yourself. And again, everything starts with awareness, but the understanding that whatever you're buying into, if you haven't looked inside yourself, it's external to you, which is to say it's someone else's, it's not yours. And this is part of this numbing thing of we are scared shitless to look inside ourselves. Just the thought of like, whoa, out of fear of what we'll find. And this then loops back into worthiness of, I'm afraid I'll find something horrible. Why is that the first place your head goes? Why instead would you not think, oh, wow, that's a journey I really want to take because there's something in there that's like a diamond and I'm going to find it and I'm going to let it shine? Nobody ever does that. Instead, it's like, oh, yeah, no, I got to watch Netflix, man. I don't want to think about it. And so back to worthiness, like, and external versus internal. Women do this. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not beautiful enough. I'm not this enough. And my question is, for whom? Right? Because that's all about you. Nobody else. It's not about other people. It's you comparing yourself to other people and making a decision. And that's the 80%. I'm unworthy. Or too much, like you talk too much or you're too brazen or you're too outspoken or you're too that. So worthiness isn't limited to I'm not enough. It's also can be I'm too much. But the bottom line is that's to whom? That's to you. And if you have not looked inside yourself, you say things like that because you're living in perpetual comparison of who and what you are with what's external to you without ever really assimilating something very critical, which is what other people think about you is none of your damn business.
But it's also being open. I would add that, yes, and it's also being open to what other people think of you and saying, do I align with that? Do I not align with that? And it's part of that same self-awareness. But if we're, instead of being critical of what other people say about us, or owning what other people say about us, just being open to us and saying, yeah, that's them, that's not me. Sometimes
Right. Witnessing.
that moment of awakening is from something someone else says.
Absolutely. But to me, it's about boundaries, right? So someone says it, I'm not saying that what other people think or say or do has absolutely nothing to do with us, but it's a boundary issue, which is to say, whatever they do, it's okay for them. None of your business, because it's what they're doing, right? And whatever they think of you is also none of your business because they're entitled to their opinion as much as you are. But to take ownership of that, to bring that unto yourself inside yourself and allow that to diminish you, which is invariably what we do with that kind of shit, right? That's not okay. And so we're so when we talk around this and this comes up with clients, they get very extreme and very annoyed with me. And you don't have to be extreme, man. It isn't like them or me or it all of these things can coexist simultaneously without you getting emotionally involved and allowing it to diminish your sense of your value, to devalue yourself and to erode your confidence. It's all it's just like calm down, man. It's all okay. It's okay for you to be you. It's okay for me to be me. And Of course, we learn from other people. What we don't learn is that we're a jerk. That's not what we're there to learn. It's to learn about other people so we can get information or make a different decision or learn something or whatever. But it's not this extreme, like, we assume a combative stance with this.
Mm,
And that's unnecessary. So
mm, yeah.
so this whole like, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but like, have you ever been with someone where you're having a disagreement and something that they either say or do, their words or their body language or like whatever, man, and all of a sudden this light bulb goes off and you're like, oh my God, she's just like I am. Or, oh my God, he's afraid of something, or oh my God, he's
Yeah.
intimidated, where all of a sudden you get, so that is the moment when that light bulb goes off of
Right.
similarity. You've just transcended this combative stance, extremism of a combative stance, to come to the center point, which is, oh wow, she's just like I am. And the moment that happens, all that other shit just falls away.
I
So,
think that story, that when that happens is not the last time it will happen. Also, that our stories are constantly shifting, and that creates a shift of story where when we come to that point, you asked if I've had that happen, or if anybody out there has had that happen, and so I encourage everybody to think about this. For me, and I don't know if I'm doing it right now because I don't care anymore, but I used to think, oh, I speak so slowly. And it was just that was the story in my head that, oh, I speak too slowly. And then
for
I
whom?
heard from someone that I speak slowly, and they actually really liked it because it was very calming for them. And I was very calming for a lot of people. Now, I'm also a bundle of intensity, right? But that's my story. But a lot of people perceive that. So there are these ins and outs. And for me, what I experienced, I don't know about all the rest of you, I experienced a lot of gratitude to realize something. And I'm not light with my gratitude. This was a monumental thing, uh, to say that, hey, my voice is calming when it's slow, which it was a lot. Those things, they're just like I am. They are scared. They are, whatever it is, that it connects us and it changes our story. That's a beautiful thing. We have the opportunity to change our story every time that we talk to someone, if we see those similarities instead of being affronted.
Yeah, yeah, right. But in my, we're conceivably having a semantical difference here, but that's a choice.
Yeah,
That's choice. You have a choice. Are you going to be pissed off, or are you going to be cool?
right.
What's it going to be? You have a choice. And so much of this for women in particular, this feeling of, I don't have a choice, and everywhere I look, everybody around me is better or smarter or richer or this or that or whatever. Um, that's that's giving our power away to something that renders us powerless. And I'm sure I don't need to say, but I will, how when you feel powerless, you feel unworthy and you have no confidence. So you have to get behind this idea that you are giving voluntarily, you are choosing to give that away. Here, take all the power. I'll just sit here and feel shitty or like whatever.
Mm,
And when we relinquish our power by choice, which it is always, that's not good. That's abnegating self-responsibility in addition to relinquishing power. So when you Don't abnegate responsibility for what you have chosen to do. You retain your power. I have the power to choose. I have the power to be angry. I have the power to be overjoyed. I have the power to turn my computer off right now and walk away. I have the power. Those are all choices.
I have the power to struggle.
Uh, Absolutely. And, that's interesting you bring that up, Lydia, because I wanted to circle back around to the importance of gratitude in this, of how lucky you are that you have the power to struggle. There
Mm,
are people who have never experienced struggle in their lives.
mm,
And understanding what, in order to fully understand something, like we don't know what light is unless we know what dark is. We
mhm.
don't know what, these labels, like I don't want to get into a label thing because that's a whole other podcast. But like you can't know one without the other. And when you know them both, it's enriching and it's empowering, and it
Mm.
affords us gratitude. I'm grateful that I've struggled.
It
And
brings us so much more. So if everything is beautiful and happy all of the time, what's beautiful? What's happy?
yeah, you don't really, yeah, and those are some of the most miserable, some of, I gotta out this. Some of the most miserable people I have ever met in my life are uber wealthy, who whose lives have entailed zero struggle, who's and what it like that. I don't want to get into a whole thing, but that was one of my clients who
Mm,
that was her deal. That was her life. She grew up privileged. She grew up, and she was the most miserable person I have ever met in my life. To the extent that when we had like a hopped on a call to see if are we going to do the dance, I was like, oh wow, man, I don't know. This is just. But the more we talked, I was just so shocked that how miserable she was and how down on herself she was, and how like no matter what she did it wasn't good enough, and it was I mean it was mind-blowing, and it
mm.
really put into perspective for me that which in our modern culture so many of us seek, like being wealthy is the end of all our troubles, or being,
Right. I'll be happy when.
yeah, exactly. Oh, life will be fine when, yeah, no, absolutely not. So that's another awareness thing. And to catch yourself, like why would you make that assumption? Again, that's external. If I have something external, internally I'll be fixed. And it just doesn't work that way, does it?
I I don't I don't think we need to be happy either. It's not just to be actually at peace with yourself,
Absolutely.
to be
Content.
curious about what's going on over there, what how curious about ourselves, curious about the world around us, but happy, happy all the time, that wouldn't again, then it would be like what's happy, but happy isn't the only thing.
Right.
Happy is a
Right.
peak.
Yeah.
Happy is our favorite flavor of ice cream. Happy is the cherry that on top, if you like the cherry. If you don't, then
Mushroom
that's
and
not.
onion pizza.
Yeah, or yeah, whatever, there's your happy. But if you have it all the time, then it's gonna be like meh, hey, I feel sick,
Right, right, right. Well, and that's another one of these things we tell ourselves about, all I want is to be happy. Why? Because again, how do you know what happy is if you don't know what unhappy is? How do you know what? So I'm totally, totally unconditionally supportive of curiosity is critical, and the understanding, just to like take a step back from the extremism we all have, like this is good, that's bad, happy, sad, yeah, all of that, it's all good, man, and it's all necessary. And I just I don't know, I mean this is a compulsion, but and also, like men's mental health, right, has been so huge. Thank God we're finally addressing the anger and the frustration and the stress and the
Right?
like, oh my God, right? And like we always as women, I think we kind of stereotype, oh, he doesn't really express emotion. He's no good at expressing emotion. And we've kind of like cut him off at the knees in a way, which is it. Well, of course, men experience emotion. They're human. We're all human. We all
Oh my goodness.
experience emotion. But there's this trend or this idea that we need to shy away from the bad shit and live in the good shit. And it's not okay to be angry. It's not okay to be frustrated. It's of course it is. What's not okay is to be angry and frustrated and not understand that you have the power to change that. The power
Yeah.
to choose to change that. And that
Yeah.
to some extent it's a it's something you're doing. It's internal. It's not external. Of
Yeah.
course we meet people who frustrate us. Of course we meet people who upset us. Of course we meet people who piss us off like nobody's business. But if I allow you to make me angry, I've just handed you my power on a plate. I do not choose to do that. I choose to retain my power and say, okay, why am I so pissed off at Lydia right now?
Right.
She's legit. She's entitled to say that. What am I doing? What am I doing? Not what is Lydia doing? What am I doing? And so
Yes.
this is the sticky wicket because we just don't want to go there, man. It's
Oh,
so
it's so
easy.
beautiful though. I mean, this is something that we are so scared about is this idea, and I'd love for you to talk about this of being responsible. It where like it's a scary thing. Like there's going to be a dire consequence to it that no, that's not our, we didn't do that. Well, yeah, you damn well did. And there's like, I don't personally believe in good and bad. I believe honestly in like there are consequences, and more people than not are aligned with certain consequences. People like to be able to have some sort of community, and if something keeps them from that, then that's a consequence they don't like. But the thought that we are responsible for that consequence, how we are, that
We don't want
thing
that.
that we can change. We
We
can
don't
change
want
and,
that.
and have a different consequence. It's like one of the most beautiful aspects of being human that there is.
No, no, because if we take responsibility and there's negative fallout, that means we're no good.
Yeah, which
How it
is
works. That's
such
what
a
we do, you know?
such
And
a fake-o story, and there's
oh,
so much of it
absolutely.
out there.
Well, and okay, so you wanted to get into it. We're going to get into it. I mean, for so many women, this came up in the context of asking for permission. I was in a similar event to this, and it was about asking for permission.
Mm,
And there's a difference between when I say to my husband, I'm gonna make pasta tonight. Do you feel like red sauce or something Northern Italian? I'm not asking his permission. I'm including him in a decision. That's
mm,
an inclusive because I care about him and I would like to make something he enjoys. That's not asking permission. Asking permission is, may I make pasta for dinner tonight? Right? So the first part of this is again discernment to tell the difference. But
mm,
what came out of this conversation was this concept of in women, and I'm sure maybe it applies to everyone, but we have this emotional arrested development where we're little girls in grown women's bodies. And
mm,
this has a lot to do with being responsible. And our fear of
mm.
taking responsibility is so great that we would rather be a child where we don't have to take responsibility. That makes us feel safe because we know that if we're a kid, that's somebody else deciding that, and there's no blowback or fallout for us. And the I don't want to take responsibility because I'm afraid of looking bad, to me is an ouroboros, a snake with its tail in its mouth, of because I'm worried about what people will say or think. And my mantra is it's none of your fucking business what other people say or think about you. So when you can, and you know, this is, again, this is kind of, I don't mean counterintuitive, but the way I'm articulating this doesn't come naturally to us. It's something that we need modeled for us or taught to us or like whatever. And I had I was lucky that when I first got into commercial production, I was in Chicago and I worked on TV commercials. And the very first TV commercial I worked on, I was a PA, a production assistant, the bottom of the totem pole. The ad agency was my dad's ad agency, the agency my dad worked at.
Mm.
And I don't remember who the client was, but on a commercial shoot, there's of course the production people, there's the ad agency people, and then there's the client. And for the
Mm.
client, it's like a field trip. They get to sit around all day eating food and whatever. And so my dad was the creative director. And I remember, so I'll never forget this. The client who had been doing everything but paying attention, we were ready to roll, and she looked up and she was like, "Why are those yellow flowers there? Who put all those yellow flowers there?" And my dad looked at her and he said, "I did. That's my job. What would you like to know?" And I was like stunned because, of course, a woman's reaction would be like, yeah, I did. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Did they have something you don't like? Did I blah, blah, blah? Yeah, no, stand in your shit, man. I did. What's on your, and not like in a combative or confrontational or negative way, devoid of emotion, but stand in your shit, man. I did that. And do you can I help you understand? Not, that's kind of patronizing, but what would you like, what do you want to say about that? Or is there something you'd like to add or change or whatever, right? But
Or just, I did, period.
yeah, I did, right? But I mean, this idea of instantly, there's the power instantly, like, oh my god, you don't, dude, calm down, man. You don't have to do that, right? Just stand in your shit and don't be scared to death making the assumption that something terrible's going to happen. And if something happens, like in your world in a symphony, and a wrong note is played, and the symphony comes to a grinding halt, and the conductor, some prima donna bitch, is like, "And who did that?" Well, everybody knows it was a French horn, dude. The orchestra, all the rest of the orchestra, they know it was you, right? And they're not going to out you in every whole orchestra pointing at Lydia. But like, it's like, I did. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. Game over. Just that easy, right?
Right. And to stop everything for a mistake is something, is that very mentality of making big of
Yeah.
something that is not, like, yeah, you own it, like the whole symphony goes on, right? And yeah, there was a note there, and nobody in the audience noticed it because everything went on, but everybody in the audience did notice it if suddenly there was tension because of that note, because we're judging, we're self-judging, we're judging others, we're and so that brings us back to this idea of standing in our shit, like owning this, being responsible. And the more we do that, the more we can all do that, the more it becomes not such a big deal. Like
Totally.
there's
Totally.
beauty, it doesn't mean we still, the fact that we are fussing about this stuff is because we care. Like we actually care. People in the orchestra care to sound good. they, at least at one point in their lives, they loved what they did and they cared what it sounded like. Whether they do anymore, I don't know. But that's a
Totally. Once upon a time, they really loved it. Yeah,
but and then this is similar with a lot of jobs. It shows up in performance types of jobs. We But if we are actually owning what it is that we do, yeah, I did make a mistake.
oh, wow.
I'm going to learn from it. I might not learn from it in the next, 5 minutes. It may take me a little while, but I will learn from it. Maybe we'll all learn from it. It's just owning that stuff, and it's okay. And also owning when we do something well. Like, that's something that I find that
Oh,
a lot of people cannot do either.
oh no. And that's another part of the Hollywood confidence formula, and radiating this attitude of confidence is you've got to be able to own all your bad shit and your good shit, right? And I was once speaking to an audience, a group of women, and we were talking about accomplishment.
Mm,
What have you accomplished? And do you acknowledge your accomplishments? And I said something like, how many of you feel like you've accomplished something?
mm,
And like two people raised their hand.
mm,
And it was kind of like this of, okay. And I asked that like three different ways. Nobody's raising their hand. It was all women. And I
mhm,
said, okay, how many of you have an undergraduate degree? 85% of the hands go up in the room. Okay, you've accomplished that. How many of you have a graduate degree? Fewer, but a lot of people. Okay, you've accomplished that. You've accomplished that, right? How many of you are married? That's an accomplishment. And how many of you have had a live birth of a child? And most of the hand, okay. But when I ask you, what have you accomplished? You say nothing. So, what does that speak to? So, acknowledging, and this, we're so programmed to not, oh no, can't talk about what I'm good at, can't talk about what I've accomplished. Okay, so that's another choice of why not. And if you're curious, you ask these questions as a kid. Why not? What's wrong? With Europeans, it's all about bragging. No, it isn't bragging. It's talking about what you bring to the table.
mm,
And this is a concept that is very alien to us and repulsive, I would go out on a limb to say, because
mhm.
we are so programmed to not. But if you can't own what you've accomplished in Hollywood, that's how I get a meeting. And that's why my ass is on a chair at the table in the meeting, because they know I know what I bring to the party. You have to be able to do that. And that's a big part of confidence. And being able to do that means acknowledging what you have accomplished. That is not an evil thing. That is not a biblical go straight to hell, do not pass go. That's not bragging. That's none of that, whatever that shit you think that is not what that is. And that is a critical skill to have to engender more and to get out of the unworthiness rut and radiate your confidence.
You know, something happened to me, and I can't talk about anyone better than I can talk about myself and my own experiences, right? But that relates to this, and I've I have a large amount of confidence. If I question myself, there's some things that I will lose confidence in. Right? But for the most part, I'm very confident that I'm going to get through whatever, that I'm going to perform at a good level. But something happened when I moved to New York City for the first time, and I was about 2 weeks in, and I was told that I should move to New York City and that I would get work. And the principal of the New York Philharmonic, who told me that, he got reamed out by his colleagues, because they were like, "You don't tell anybody that ever.
Ever.
And but I was there and I wasn't expecting any work. And I was sitting around in my lounge pants, playing a game, and it was like a Friday night, and I get called up by the New York City Ballet. They said, "Are you in the union yet? Are you available? Can you come down?" And one of the horn players had there was a mistake, and there wasn't a sub, and there was the ballet was going on. Um, and I said, sure. So, I threw a black dress over my head, and I caught a cab, and I went down to Lincoln Center, and I went through the stage door, and it was a few minutes into it at this point. I went as fast as I could. I was really quick, but you can't when they're calling as the
Yeah.
baton.
As the curtain goes up. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
For sure.
So I did this, and basically I sat down in a seat. It was the third horn seat. Somebody pointed where we were, and I started to play. And we played along, and it was fine. And then suddenly there's a pause. If you know anything about music is in life is a series of action and pauses, and that makes the rhythm, that makes the forward motion. That's how we progress in music. And there was a pause, and right in that pause I let out a big note. It wasn't a wrong note, it wasn't a bad note, it was just a note. And people around chuckled because that note wasn't supposed to be there. That's like a moment of silence up on the stage. um, and then after the horn player next to me, I was like, I should have told you about that. Yeah, the rest before that note is a mistake, and it needs to be changed.
Was
So
it
I was
in the
just
score? A
it was in
mistake
the
in the score?
yeah, yeah.
Oh
It
wow.
wasn't it yeah.
Oh wow, dude.
I ended up getting nonstop work because of that. Because at that point, I was brought on. I was asked to to be the graduate, the doctoral fellow at Yale. I was asked to be, which I didn't end up doing for different reasons, but I got given work because I was vouched for so highly by those people who were confident. Actually, the people in that section were confident. If they had not been confident, then they would have been like, she screwed up. But they were confident, and it taught me that, if I had just been mousy and playing in a mousy way, then nobody would have really heard that note and been like, what's that squeak over there? But I let out a really loud note, and there it was. And that's my story, because it it made me feel a certain way. B, it made other people feel a certain way, uncomfortable, giddy,
Supportive.
supportive, self-aware, not self-aware, whatever it was. They made a number of people feel a certain way, and it caused a ripple effect in my life,
I love
from
that story.
making a gigantic
Faux pas, as it were. Yes,
yeah.
yes. What was the ballet?
Uh, it was Swan Lake.
Oh God. Wow. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love that story on so many levels because well, because it's a great story. I mean, and how. But you didn't give anything away. You stood in your shit. And to me, one of the most valuable takeaways from that story is when we live in our head, this world of comparing and the external and whatever, what'll they think? What'll they say? You made a mistake, but it's this similarity versus difference thing. Those people around you weren't like, oh my God, where did they get her? That guy next to you gave you a lifesaver to say, oh, our bad. The score is incorrect. So nobody was all like oh my God, where did this freak come from? Right? And when we get out of that by eh, being responsible for ourselves, we're often so surprised of the result. It doesn't engender hostility and censure and judgment. It engenders support and help.
But
And
it could, right? If we were to take a different,
right,
like,
but well, I
I
would
got called in. Why should I get called in? I mean, it was strange. I got called in by I got recommended by the first cellist. All right. But I'm going, and I went there, and it was their mistake. I could have had the idea, and it would have perpetuated itself, that this was all being put upon me.
well, if you were someone who wasn't responsible for what you're doing, yes, this is
Right.
all happening to me rather
Right.
than happening for me and catapulted my career forward.
Right, right. And it's not just owning it, but that and I think I didn't have that reaction to it, like that. Oh man, why is all this happening to me?
Yeah.
And there's, when you can do that, and maybe there's no time. Maybe there's just no time. Like I said, I threw the dress over my head. I got a cab, um, and maybe there's just no time there. But I'm inclined to think that for whatever reason, there's the story was um, a telling turning point in my life in New York.
Absolutely. And so talk I'd love to talk about or get into briefly in our couple of remaining minutes about
Mhm.
how the unknown, you jumped into the unknown
Mm,
and something that you never could have dreamed or imagined was the result of that leap.
mm.
And in my world, man, the zone of the known. We're so comfortable because what we think we know and we think we believe, and I know this and I know that, and yet you don't know anything, man. And if you can only another relinquish that monkey death grip on, oh, I know this, I know that, I blah 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 blah. I've talked to people who are like, oh, well, I just can't imagine. Well, that's the whole point. You can't imagine. Stop trying to open your hand, let that go, and amazing, mind blowing things happen. The unknown is the unlimited. And as I'm fond of saying, the un in unknown is the same un in unlimited.
Yeah.
And unless you go there, you're limiting yourself. You're in that feedback loop of what I think I know and what I think I believe. And like the subtitle of my book is Accidental Discoveries, Compliments of the Universe. And it's all about all the things we don't know we already know,
Mm.
right? Part of that's owning our accomplishments, but part of it's all the things we don't know we already know are like we've all got this inside of us. If we just like, okay, it's okay, just it's okay, right? It's okay. It's okay to throw on the dress, jump in the cab, blurt out a note at a rest in the score and not need to know like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? Doesn't matter. It happened. It's done. and
Yeah.
and the unknown of and look the path that set you on. So that's like beautiful at that level.
Right. Yeah. I also like to say that the something similar. I say that the that uncertainty is the sum of all possibilities. The fact is, we have uncertainty in our life all the time. We may think we're certain, but there's
Yeah,
no
no.
certainty. Just let it go. Open up to that, because that's where all the possibilities are. We It's pretty egotistical to think that we know everything, and we know what's good. And that's all there is that's good. There's a lot more out there that might be better than we know. So just, get over yourself and go do it. Go let it go try it. If you miss it, there'll be another unknown.
Yeah, it kind of
Don't worry
doesn't
about
matter,
it.
but it's
Yeah.
also egocentric to be like, I'm uncertain, but whatever it is, I'm uncertain and I'm not at ease with uncertainty because whatever happens is going to adversely affect me. Meanwhile, back at me, it's all about me. It's all about what people think about me. It's all about me being here. You know what? That's our friend Carrie, you and I and our friend Carrie frequently talk about such a huge part of living authentically is to get over yourself, to recognize, again, discernment, what is egoic and what is not, what's yours and what is not yours.
Yeah.
And hey, we're all born with an ego. If we didn't have an ego, we would be a nematode. We wouldn't be a member of the human species, right? But get a grip, dude. You got one. And we read about all the books, man, the self-help, the podcast, the this, the that. It's all about in your ego. And then people work their whole lives to try to overcome their ego. So instead of trying to something that's inherently part of your humanity, instead of trying to rip that out of your body and throw it away because it's bad, I have to label it, it's bad. It isn't bad, it just
Bad.
is.
It
It's
just
part of
is.
you. Become aware of it and learn it. Back to square one of look inside yourself. Discern that voice. What is that voice telling you you're not this, you're not blah, 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 whatever that big loud voice is saying? Just because it's the loudest voice in the room doesn't mean you have to listen to it.
Yeah.
So rather than we've got to rip this out and throw it away from us, it's part of you. Learn it, find it, identify it, learn it, love it, and give it some other task to do rather than running your life.
Accept it, let it, yeah, be respectful of it and let it be at peace, because then we can actually notice some other things going on. If we do, but if you fight it and choke it and strain, then yeah, you're still that. Guess what? That's still ego.
Yeah,
You're just fighting with yourself. That's that
it.
snake, with its own tail in its mouth thing again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
What a
amazing.
cool convo, girly.
And yeah, we've got that was really really a good nematodes definitely got me. Well, as far as this conversation, if you all enjoyed this conversation, please hit like. And if you haven't done it already and you like the conversations on this station, then ever so gently push the subscribe button. Jennifer, I appreciate you, and great appreciation to all the comments from the audience. If you would like to get in touch with Jennifer, please look down in the show notes, and again, right there on Jennifer's name is her website and how you can reach out and work with Jennifer. So I appreciate you, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Deep appreciation and gratitude for having me, Lydia. It was a blast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.